This is Chapter 12, Guardian of Ailos. Three familiar beams of light arose from the floor, and Nelson's stomach started to turn. He stood in the middle of the cave with Harold on his shoulder and watched as the light imbued the walls, illuminating the characters engraved throughout the room. Unimpressed, Sheila found a comfortable spot against the wall and licked her scales through her eagle-like beak. "I don't know about this," Nelson said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Are you sure we should go in there? I mean, it sounds like going to the dragon is the opposite of what we should do. Shouldn't we just lock the door or something?" Sid and her mom approached the dragon's door, both wielding their lockets. "Seriously," Nelson spoke up again. "Remind me, why are we going in there?" Sid turned and gave Nelson a soft smile. "Come on now. You know we can't just wait here. He's coming for our home. And now that he has the stone to his locket, who knows what kind of power he'll have? Our only option is to keep him bound behind that door. That means we have to go to him." "That's right, Nelson," Mina said. "If he finds the door while he has his locket, then he will have access to all of the realms. He's already taken everything from Ailos. I'm afraid if he makes it to our world, we may not be able to stop him." Nelson hung his head in defeat. "Here we go. Again." He looked up at Harold and shrugged. Harold didn't look too confident. His beady eyes glistened in the golden light as he hummed what sounded like a question. "Don't worry, buddy," Nelson replied. "I won't leave you. I'll keep you safe." He didn't know how, but he knew he would keep his word, and that seemed to give his furry little friend the confidence he needed. Harold nodded and then perked up, striking a brave pose. "Okay, you two," Sid said. "It's time." "Stay behind us," Mina added. "We don't know exactly what to expect, so let us go in first. We will let you know when it's safe." Nelson didn't mind that at all. He had no intention of going in first, so he gave a thumbs up and gladly stepped back as Sid placed her locket in the dragon's mouth. It clicked as it settled into the wall. Mina stood beside her and held her locket in her left hand, wrapping the necklace around her wrist and drawing her sword. The floor started to rumble and shake as Sid whispered a phrase. Sheila raised her head and started to growl. Nelson noticed the pouch below her throat, just above her chest, fill with something glowing. Fire breather. That's right. Images of the ship on fire returned to him. At least she's on our side, he thought. The rumbling grew louder, and Nelson wiped sweaty palms against his pants. Harold scurried over to his other shoulder, and Sid placed her ear up against the wall. "Anything?" Mina asked. Sid looked back and shook her head. "Maybe..." Click. The door popped open. A foul stench filled the room. Sid retched and covered her nose. Mina tensed and readied her sword. Nelson watched as the two of them made eye contact. When Mina nodded, Sid pushed the door open. Nelson only saw darkness fill the open doorway. "What's in there?" Nelson whispered. He tried peeking around Mina, but her wide shoulders blocked the remaining portion of the door. "Anything?" Mina held up a finger until Sid looked back and returned a nod. Then, with her sword leading the way, Mina inched her way past Sid, careful not to make a noise. A black smoke consumed her body as she disappeared. Sid followed after. Nelson nearly gasped as his friend passed beyond the veil. His whisper fell to the ground, and once again he found himself on the threshold of a new realm. This one, however, did not carry the light-hearted glow of Ailos or the purple charm of Earth. There would be no frolicking through sandy beaches or gazing at sorbet-colored skies. This was a realm of fire. Like standing on the edge of a cold ocean, Nelson psyched himself up, deep breaths, loose hands shaking and slapping his side. "Come on now, you got this. It's no big deal." But of course, it was a big deal. A dragon. one that had tormented his dreams and sent demons to track him down, inhabited the realm in front of him. And, by the way, that dragon wanted to kill and enslave anyone that looked like a human. Harold hummed, straight into Nelson's ear. He had forgotten all about the little marmot and almost swiped him off his shoulder. "Harold," Nelson snapped with a whisper, "you almost gave me a heart attack." Harold hummed a remorseful hum, then patted Nelson's head. The small padded paw tickled, and Nelson shook it off. "It's okay, bud. I know you didn't mean it." The two of them took one last puff of stale castle air before Nelson plunged them into the darkness. Only Sheila stayed behind, nestled comfortably in a far-off corner. The sound of howling wind and distant whispers welcomed Nelson on the other side of the door. To his surprise, the hall he stood in looked very familiar. For a second, he thought he had walked back into the cave where all this adventure started. The dusty ground beneath his feet and the smell of moss and rain reminded him of the day Sid first led him to explore the cave. A slight smile started to form. See, that wasn't so bad. "You coming?" Sid asked. Her voice carried through the halls on an echo and a breeze. At the sound of Sid's voice, Harold jumped off of Nelson's shoulder and ran down the hall. The glow of Sid's necklace began to reveal a corner up ahead, where she stood waiting. Nelson just stood there. "Is everything okay?" Sid asked as she walked back toward him. "Yeah, I guess," Nelson answered. I don't know. I'm not like you, Sid. None of this comes naturally to me." He gestured to the dark walls around them. "Is it so wrong of me to just want to go back home? Back to the way things were?" His eyes were fixed at the dirty floor and his filthy shoes. The memories of early summer and their once carefree play only made him more afraid of the task at hand. But he didn't know how to tell her. He definitely didn't want to let her down, but he was sad. "I just feel like I'm losing you, and the only way not to is doing the things that scare me. But I'm not brave. I'm not adventurous. I'm just, I don't know, me." He looked up as Sid made her way to him. "Oh, Nell. Being you is the reason I'm your friend." Sid put her hand on his shoulder. "Are you kidding me? After my mom disappeared, I was a mess, and you were the only one at school to sit with me. Everyone else thought I was a weirdo because of how sad I was, but not you." A tear rolled down Sid's cheek, but not a sad one. Her smile told Nelson that much, which made his eyes start to water too. Something that felt like a rock formed at the back of his throat. He didn't want to cry. Or maybe he did. He just didn't want her to see him cry. "You, Nelson," Sid continued, "are my best friend. And without you, I would have never found my mom. You may not rush into things like me, but you are brave. You took a chance on me. You saw a sad, lonely girl who had nothing in common with you and chose to be her friend. You had no idea this is what you were getting. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. If we even have a chance at protecting our home, it's because you'll be by my side. You're smart, you're kind, and it's your courage that has carried me for 6 years." That did it. No matter how hard Nelson tried, the flood of tears could not be stopped. He tried to cover his eyes, anything to stop the flow, but it was no use. Sid stepped in and wrapped her arms around him. She held him as the knot in his throat loosened, and he sobbed. "I'm sorry," Nelson said between sniffles. "I don't know why I'm crying. It's okay." Sid pulled him in closer. "It's just," Nelson stepped back to look her in the eyes. "You and Mina have all that power." He pointed to the glowing locket. "And I feel like I'm just in the way." "But you're not," Sid said. "A friend is never in the way. At least not a true friend. Real friends are willing to redirect, to say hard things, to be a voice of reason. Nelson, you are a true friend. I mean it when I say I would not have made it this far without you." Sid reached out and hugged Nelson again. After a few moments passed, when Nelson was able to control his breathing, He parted from the hug and looked his friend in the eyes. "That's good," he said, wiping his nose with his hand. "Because I have no idea how to get home, so you're stuck with me no matter what." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Sid smiled. Unlike the castle basement, it didn't take long for the two of them to navigate the tunnels. Eventually, they caught up to Mina at the mouth of a large black cave, nothing like the one Nelson remembered. The walls here were made of jagged black rock, obsidian-like, and black sand covered the floor. Mina stood at the opening of the cave with the faint red glow of setting sun beyond her. The black cloak she wore fluttered in the breeze. Her long black hair danced out to the side. She looked so cool. Nelson couldn't stop imagining them in some kind of comic book. The view was too perfect. "Is this the right place?" Nelson asked. "Yes, we are in the right place. This is Pyrnos, the realm of fire," Mina replied, looking out over a sea of blackened trees. Ash fell constantly from the sky. Sid walked over and joined them, Harold close by her feet. Harold hummed, pointing to a mountain on the other side of a decrepit forest. "That's right," Mina said. "Mount Pyre. That's where we are headed." Harold looked up at Sid. Concerned, he leaned into her leg and held it tight with his little arm. "It's going to be okay," Sid said, looking down at the little marmot. "We've got Nelson. He'll protect us." She winked, then looked over at Nelson and smiled. "Won't you, Nell?" Nelson played along. He knelt down and gave a confident nod. "Come on, bud. I got you." He didn't move fast, but Harold let go of Sid's leg after receiving a reassuring glance from her, and then scurried up Nelson's outstretched arm. "Hey," said Nelson. "What about Sheila? Why didn't she come?" "Ah, yes. I'm leaving her to make sure the doorway is protected," Mina replied. "Don't worry. She knows what to do." Nelson pursed his lips and nodded. "Makes sense." "Okay, then," he said. "Lead the way." Mina let out a chuckle. "I like the enthusiasm, but not yet. First, you two need to rest, and I need to find us some supplies." She looked at Nelson and pointed at his empty hand. "And you, sir, need a weapon." "A weapon?" Nelson asked, swallowing back his nerves. "Well, yes," Mina said. "Can't go into a battle without a weapon." Nelson turned to Sid, worry plastered all over his face. How had he come this far without ever considering the fact that he might have to actually fight? That nasty knot in his stomach came back with a vengeance. "Why don't you two get some sleep? You'll be safe here. I'll be back for you before you know it. Oh, and Nelson?" Mina turned back and pulled something out of her cloak. "Hold on to this for me." She tossed him the golden locket. But, what about you?" "Keep it safe. That stone belonged to a king once." Mina stood tall and smiled in approval. "It suits you." Meanwhile, Sid grabbed the bed rolls from their packs and laid them out on the ground. After Mina left and Nelson had finished eyeing the new gift, he walked over to Sid. "You're really okay with her leaving again?" Sid didn't bother turning away from her task. She just softly replied with a, "Uh-huh." "But what if she doesn't—" He stopped because he realized just what he was about to say. Sid had already experienced this once before. He made sure to keep his eye on the fading orange sky in front of him. "It's just, I don't want Harold getting all afraid again." Nelson eyed Harold, who glared up at him. "Sorry," Nelson mouthed and shrugged. He couldn't see Sid's face, but he imagined she rolled her eyes too. She didn't. She just smiled and continued to roll out the second bedroll. "She'll be fine," Sid said. "And she's right. We need our rest. I, for one, am exhausted. Can you believe we started today with a shipwreck?" She chuckled and then laid down. "How wild is that?" "Yeah, wild," Nelson agreed. He knelt down onto his bed and started sliding under the flap. "Okay, but can Harold sleep with you? He's always—" By the time he turned, he saw Sid lying on her side, Harold snuggled up against her stomach and fast asleep. Nelson rolled over and pulled out the golden stone. It didn't glow like Sid's, but still, he couldn't take his eyes off of it. He couldn't believe that Mina gave it to him. She had searched for it for years. Nelson's mind drifted back to the day he took the dragon's breath. A sting of shame made his heart race. He was guilty. He didn't deserve the stone. No, he thought. This one is different. Nelson pulled the stone close to his chest, trying to push away the shame. This stone, it was a gift. Even if it never glowed, never filled him with unthinkable power, it represented something so much more. It represented forgiveness. Mina hadn't just given him a magical stone. She gave him a new start, a chance at redemption. Thanks for listening to Chapter 12 of The Guardian of Ailos. As a reminder, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment or come find us on Substack, and we'll be right back next week with Chapter 13.